So we have finally arrived at the moment, Devin.
Well, I mean, 32 episodes into this, for those that are still like remaining with us on this journey, congratulate them.
Yeah, for the 10 of you that watched, thanks. This is like around episode 32.
Yeah.
We're watching episode 1 of the Phantom Menace.
Right.
This is the Podrace. And if you're kind of keeping score at home, keeping track, this is the 1 hour to about an hour, 10-minute mark of the movie.
Yeah.
It is fascinating. Going back and rewatching the sequence, sort of diving into it a little bit more than just like sitting there watching it.
Yeah.
Considering where this lands in Star Wars lore, but also just within filmmaking itself within Star Wars, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah. And so I think the first question, as we come to this sequence, is, obviously people say it's great. 20 years later, I would still say it's a great sequence.
Yeah.
But what makes it great? Like when we say things like that and in these platitudes and praise we heap on the pod race sequence, even for people that don't like episode 1.
Yeah.
So there is a general that was pretty interesting what they did there.
Yeah.
Or I really liked that, but I don't like the movie.
Right.
So what makes it great, Devin? Like for you, as you look at this 10-minute long sequence of the pod race where Anakin is sort of racing for others, which is an interesting kind of backdrop.
Right.
What makes it great?
I think it's a really valid question. I think one of the things that makes it great, if not perhaps at the top of the list, is it's one of those instances, not just in Star Wars, but in cinema in general, that it makes a difference if you've got the sound system to go with it, especially in the theater with the large screen. At the time that this came out in the theater, DVDs were only for the rich and famous, right?
Yes.
But now we have these home theater systems where we can pop in a Blu-ray of this and have that theater experience. And so one of the things that makes it great, in my opinion, is the sound quality and the visual quality that really you're swept up into it, and it's very overstimulating in a good way.
Yeah, there is a lot in the sequence itself. There is so much going on.
Yeah,
and not like you said, not necessarily in a bad way.
Right.
You look at just the production design alone.
Right.
And Lucas said that it's interesting the way Lucas approached it. He wanted the sequence itself to really show that they were going fast. And those people that know the biography of Lucas, they know he's always really been interested in car racing, and he
feels the need for speed.
He does, and it shows up in THX 1138. It shows up in a lot of the things he makes, a lot of the movies he does. There is these sequences of chasing, right? Even in some of the Indiana Jones films, you get that, and so that element, he wanted to make sure things looked like they were really going 500 miles an hour.
Right.
And I think they succeeded. Mm-hmm. But not only that, he developed as a filmmaker these rules, which were really interesting. He has this rule that, you have these two engines, they're coupled together by this energy, source. Right. But beyond that, they're carrying this little pod.
Right.
Beyond that, be creative. And I love that he did that for the artists and the designers. He said, here are the rules, now create within that. And as they designed, all of those, if you look at the pod race sequence, all the engines are different, and the way they designed it is it's from their different planets, their different locations. And so it's not just a bunch of pods made on Malstar. It's pods made on Tatooine, on Corellia, all over the galaxy. And I love that.
Yeah.
The rule set that he gave, but then he allowed them to go wild with their imagination.
And it's reminiscent. It'd be easy to fall into a trap of it's NASCAR on Tatooine. But I think one of the things that's cool about that, though, and you hit on it, and that is if you get away from quote unquote NASCAR, but you go to some place in the U.S., in the South, on the East Coast, in places where just racing in general is big, especially at local tracks. And a lot of that is what you have. You have people cobbling together their car to hopefully just make it through the night, perhaps win the purse of a couple $100 at best. And I think that's one of the things that this does really well. That you had mentioned. It's just kind of this cobbling together. It reflects the driver in many cases.
Or their personality.
Yeah. And so I love that impact from it. I'm curious though, because this scene takes up a girth of the total runtime in the film.
Yeah.
And we're estimating somewhere around 5 to 6% of the entire film is this one sequence.
Yes.
Why do you think that Lucas felt, in addition to his need for speed, why do you think he felt like it deserved that much screen time?
I think, one, and for better for worse, Lucas went relatively unchecked on this film.
Yeah.
He didn't have any he didn't have any voices saying, I don't think we should do that.
Yeah.
That could maybe throw their weight around.
Yeah.
And so, for better for worse, he loves racing. He's like, let's do it. Let's just go wild.
Yeah.
And I think there's some people who say, oh, no, it didn't work. It's too long. I think it is one of those sequences that in filmmaking really pushed the boundaries. With sound, Ben Burtt did amazing things. I mean, just all the different sounds the engines make. It's stunning. But not only that is the computer animation done and the model work. A lot of people always keep on the Phantom Menace that it's not, it's this big CGI fest.
Right.
The more I've revisited the Phantom Menace, I've learned that a ton of model work was used. A ton. And a lot of shots involving models. It's really surprising. But I think the problem when people kind of hurl that insult or that critique at the Phantom Menace is I don't think it is because it's a CGI that it's bad.
Right.
Because they use CGI. I think actors and people didn't know how to interact with CGI.
Yeah.
And the environments were so sterile at that time, early on in the process of CGI filmmaking, where they're using lots and lots of shots, lots of green screen.
Right.
And so I get that critique, but I think, people use more CGI shots now and it comes across very believable. Look at the Jungle Book.
Right.
Like this little boy interacts with a digital environment, but the way they understand how to do that.
Right.
So all that to say is Lucas is pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
He's, doing things that haven't been done. And to be frank, 20 years later, this sequence stands up.
It does. It really does.
It's stunning.
Yeah.
And so you got the sound, you got the visual effects, you have this incredible model work, set design.
Yeah.
They designed the course. There is an actual design of a course.
Right.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
And Lucas has always set the bar so high that people are I don't know how we're going to get there, but they get there.
Right.
And I think for a lot of reasons, but for that reason alone, this bar setting and all of these artists kind of meeting that bar, I think it makes it one of the most, I can't believe I'm saying this, but one of the most important sequences within Star Wars.
Wow.
Just because of what it did visual effects wise.
Right.
I don't know, what about you? All this time given...
Well, first I want to touch on something that you said, and that was sound design.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the sound of Podracers is one of my favorite Star Wars sounds. There are probably some that I would default to as oh, that's a lightsaber. Oh, that's a blaster. But the sound of a Podracer, there's just something kind of awesome and magical about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that those who Imagineered Batuu, Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland and Disney World knew that to some extent, because what do we have in one of the main dining experiences is we have a ginormous pod racer hanging from the ceiling that's heating the food that they're serving at the restaurant.
Yeah.
I think that it's an interesting take. Two other things. One, it's an interesting take on Lucas pushing special effects, green screen, all that. What he was heralded for with the original Star Wars and pushing blue screen and matting and all these things, shooting through an artist's rendition on glass painting, is something that is one of the things that gets, I guess, pushed back against or critiqued most with the prequels. But once again, because of what he did with the prequels, we have other pieces of work. You mentioned the latest Jungle Book. We're at a spot right now where we don't even know if we can call things like that live action, right?
Yeah, it's hard.
While we're filming this, The Lion King is in the box office.
Yes.
Some people, that's not live action. But because our eyes now see these elements that are so graphically stunning, well, not to say that Lucas was solely responsible for that, but because of what he did and his artists did, in the sequels, or rather the prequels, excuse me, is where we have now these non-live action, live action films like The Lion King, like The Jungle Book, things like that. I think the other thing is when we look at this sequence, granted, it's intriguing that it's so long. Mm-hmm. We look at some of the other pieces within the Star Wars galaxy that take up this much runtime.
Yeah.
And we're looking at space battles. We're looking at lightsaber duels. And so when I look at pod racing in relation to that as far as screen time, what's Lucas telling me by that? Well, obviously he's telling me that like this is actually really important. It's not just for visual effects, that this is an important piece. But let me kind of toss it back at you. So what didn't work for you within the pod racing scenes?
Yeah, that's the question. I think it's hard to answer.
Yeah.
I would say the creature farting right before the episode or before the race, that didn't work for me. But the race itself, I totally dug. The only critique is that there is a moment in the race where Anakin kind of gets his crap together and he's going to run down. It's the last lap, last section of the lap. Yeah. And Anakin kind of fixes a problem he's having on the pod, and then he guns it to chase down Sebulba in the last stretch of the race.
Right.
And there's a moment where they're sort of in a canyon and he's just gunning it. I love it. The camera focuses in on the engine turning.
Yeah.
And the sound is just incredible. The music is just thumping at that moment. Right. And it goes to Anakin and it's this little 8-year-old.
Yeah.
There's this moment where the willing suspension of disbelief, which it's Star Wars, so much you have to do to
Right.
I looked at him, I go, I get it. He's using the Force. I get it.
Yeah.
It would have worked for me if even 4 more years of age, early teen maybe. Yeah. It's just something about that. And it's not that I hate little kids. Well, maybe I do, but it's just something about that moment in the whole race. I'm just kind of
wow. Enough to undo.
No, but it's kind of you wonder. It's a what if moment. I wonder, what if Anakin's just a little bit older? And we can talk about that ad nauseum. Would that have dramatically worked better if he was older? I get what Lucas is doing. It's a children's story. I get it, but it's that moment. I'm just okay, music, engines, race, excitement. Right. I get it. I'm in.
Right.
But it's that little moment. I would say the only other thing that didn't bug me, it did not work, but it was one of those it's just the Tusken Raiders, the two-headed announcer, just that whole there's some Tusken Raiders camped out on the Dune Sea. It's just kind of okay.
Yeah.
Other than that, design, sound, race, excitement. Love it.
Yeah.
What about you? Is there anything that did not work?
Well, first off, it's interesting because I would agree with you on that one split moment of screen time where we kind of go back to little young Annie.
Yeah.
I first want to say, one of the things that did work for me was Aura Singh, because the actress that plays her is actually from...
She's from here.
Here.
Yeah.
I think the thing that probably makes me wince the most with the scene is the two-headed announcer.
Yeah.
It was, I would draw comparable lines between that and what we got in the film Dodgeball. Probably Dodgeball a little bit more.
Yes.
I even now I can see the two-headed announcer going bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah.
It was just a little too slapsticky for me.
Yeah.
Personal taste, totally subjective, right?
Yes.
But those are the things that...
There's someone right now going...
Yeah, I know, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Mainly because you read all the comments.
Yeah. It's coming to me.
But I'm curious if you think, the slapstick or lightheartedness of those two actually takes away from the intensity of what's at stake here within the race.
Yeah. I don't mind an announcer.
Yeah.
In fact, what's odd, and we're going to keep looking at the pod race in this next episode, but you know, what's surprising to me is as much as I was kind of like, with the two-headed announcer, there is a moment where, I think it's lap 2, where they go through, maybe going into the third lap, and the announcer says, you know, so Bulba's in the lead, followed closely by Skywalker.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in the movie in 1999, and that's one of the chill-inducing moments.
Really?
For me. It is. I don't know why. Maybe I'm ashamed to admit it. After this is over, I might edit this out. But I don't know. I think it was just a whole nostalgia factor playing in. But like the way it was said, like I liked that moment.
Interesting.
I don't mind the announcing.
Okay, so let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
With that, we've touched on this so many times throughout the Star Wars saga, right? Like we wondered if Rogue One could pull it off because we know what the outcome is. They're going to get the plans.
Yeah.
Were you able to suspend belief, or did it wreck it knowing like, well, we know Anakin's going to win this stupid thing?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I knew. I mean, we all knew it.
Yeah.
I think I'm more
tracked though.
Here's the thing: when you're watching the sequence for the first time, even today when you go back and watch it, I think, and this goes without saying that John Williams' score is so phenomenal,
right?
But one of the reasons why John Williams is the master that he is he through music can manipulate in a good way, manipulate our emotions to feel, and I think the score comes in at the right moments. They use sound as the score for a lot, like the sound effects, as the score for most of the race.
Right.
But when you get to that sort of end point and the music kicks in, it makes it exciting. Yeah. Even though you know, like, Anakin's going to win. Right. Like, there's the sound, you cannot, like, disregard the value of both the sound effects of the pod, the race, all of that stuff, but then the music coming in at the end as you go into the last stretch of the race, and you're just like, you're in. And it's because of that, I think. Yeah. And so, you know he's going to win. You know he's going to make it. And yet, John Williams manipulates us time and time again. And
nobody I would rather have manipulate me than John Williams.
Manipulate us, John.
Yes.
So what do you guys think? You know, what makes the pod race sequence great? We would love to read, or I'll read your comments, he won't. But, like, I would love to know what you guys think about it. You know, we're going to come back in our next episode and continue to sort of dive into the race itself. But we would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.